In this video, we will try to understand what exactly is termed as assembly, a EXE and a DLL. Now, if we go to Microsoft.com and if you try to read the definition of assembly, it says that it is a fundamental unit of deployment. Now, English is my second language. I know if you are a person who is from US or from UK or from an English speaking country, you can understand this. But believe me, when I first read this, it was very difficult for me to understand what exactly it means, right? So let me put in simple word. Assembly is nothing but it is a pre-compiled chunk of .NET code. It is a pre-compiled chunk of .NET code which can be run by the CLR. So in other words, for example, now you can see over here that I have a very simple project, called as my console, right? And if you see this my console, if I go to the folder of my console, I see a lot of things. I see the source code program.cs, I see the config file, I see assembly info.cs and a lot of things. But when I go and hit this build button, when I say build over here, right, what it does is it actually goes and puts this whole thing into a single EXE, a single unit. So you can see this my console over here is a single unit. Now what I can do is I can go and copy this and I can run this program anywhere. So basically I can go and just put this in my user like this. I can paste it and I can just run this. So you can see now, I know that there is nothing happening in the application, but the point is that this is a single unit of deployment. I can copy this without copying the other files and put it on my production environment. So assembly is nothing but it is a single unit of deployment, or if you put in simple words, it is a chunk of code, it is a pre-compiled chunk of code which can be executed by the CLR. Now assemblies can be of various types. For example, we just saw assembly which is a EXE, a executable. And the other kind of assemblies, what we can have is a DLL. For example, if I go and I add a project of a type class library, it becomes a DLL. For example, you can see that I will just add a class library over here. I will term this as my DLL. So now in this project, in this solution, I have two assemblies. One is a type of EXE. So this my console is a type of EXE and this is a type of DLL. So if I build this project very quickly, if I rebuild this and if I go to my project over here, you can see now in this my console, in this my console, I have this assembly, my console EXE, and in the my DLL I have my DLL.dll. So this is the DLL. DLL stands for dynamic link library and EXE is nothing but the executable. So now the next question which comes is that, so what is the difference between a DLL and a EXE? A EXE actually runs in his own address space, in his own memory space. For example, if I go and write here console.writeLine, right, let us say hello, right, also let me just say console.read so that we can wait. So if I now build this, okay, and if I go to my project over here and if I see this my console, if I go to the bin directory and if I click on my console, now this program out here, this EXE out here is running in his own address space. If I again click, you can see now I have two EXEs. This EXE is running in his own memory address and this EXE is running in his own memory address, right? So both of them are having separate memory addresses. But if you see a DLL, right, so if you see this DLL out here, which I have this my DLL, this my DLL cannot invoke by himself. He needs a hoster. He needs a consumer who will invoke it. So a DLL will actually run inside some other memory space. So there will be a console application, must be, and that console application will consume this DLL and he will run in the address space of that exe. So for example, if I want to use this DLL, so I will add a reference. So let me add a reference out here, right? And what I will do is inside this DLL, I will just say hello. In case you are new to these keywords like namespace and class, what I would suggest is please go and watch the object-oriented programming videos, you know, what we have on correspondvideo.com. So I will not explain them now. At this moment, our concentration is to understand assembly, exe and DLL, right? So let us say I have a simple method out here, and over here I will just say return, this is from DLL, right? So now I'm going to go and run this DLL inside this my console. So this thing out here cannot run by itself. The DLL cannot run in its own address space. It will actually run inside some hoster. So over here I will now go and add a reference of this my DLL. It is already done. So now I can go here and say, okay, I want to use the DLL, right? And in his address space, that means in the exe's address space, now we will go and create the object of class 1, right? And we will say console.writeLine obj.method, right? So if you now see, in this case, when I run this exe, this DLL will be running in the address space of that exe. You can see now this the DLL, you know, what we have is now hosted inside the address space of the exe. So a exe actually runs in its own address space, but a DLL runs in does not have his own address space, and it needs a hoster or a consumer to invoke him. So why do we have these concepts separately? I mean to say, like, why do we have a exe which can run in its own address space, and then why we have a DLL, a dynamic link library, which actually runs inside the address space of some other hoster? The whole point of a DLL or of a library, I will say rather, is nothing but, you know, for reusability. For example, now think about it. You know, this my DLL, you know, if I want to go and reuse it into some other project, it is very easy, right? I can just add a reference and then invoke it. So basically, whatever code you want to reuse, what people do is, you know, they go and put into a DLL and then they consume into exes. Okay. So the whole point of DLL is of reusability. So you create the DLL once, and then you can host it inside a console application, you can host it inside a Windows application, you can host it inside a ASP.NET application. So all the other applications out there, you know, are, you know, they can run by themselves, you know, but a DLL, you know, will run inside the address space of those hosters. So the whole point of DLL is reusability, and the whole point of exes is to just run in its own address space and start executing the code. So I hope that you enjoyed this session. In this session, we were trying to understand what exactly is an assembly, what is an exe, and what is a DLL. Thank you so much.
With this, we come to the end. The summary is, what is a DLL, what is an EXE and assembly. We discussed these things in today's class, and how to implement in C#.NET we have discussed. In the classroom activity, we will discuss about differences between DLL, EXE and assembly, and how to write the code to use one project's DLL in another projects. Thank you.